My name is Jessica Smith, I'm 28, and I plan weddings in Boston. For nearly a decade, I've built dream celebrations for hundreds of couples, steady hands in chaos, extra pins for torn veils, a calm smile before every I do. I believed that when my day came, my parents would finally be proud. Instead, at my small backyard wedding, their chairs sat empty. They called it trivial and flew to Hawaii with my sister Samantha, posting radiant photos. The silence cut deeper than any broken promise, each step down the aisle echoing that word. As I turn to you now, I wonder if your joy has ever been dismissed by the people you love most. How did you keep walking? I grew up in Massachusetts, in a large house with a flawless lawn and a driveway lined with shining cars. From the street, everything looked perfect, the kind of home neighbors admired and envied. Inside, though, love was measured not by hugs or laughter, but by trophies, grades, and resumes. My dad, a sharp-tongued lawyer, and my mom, a high-powered CFO, spoke only the language of success. Dinner conversations were less about family stories and more about who achieved what that week, whose future looked brighter, and who had fallen short. We looked like the American dream, but I often felt like an actor playing a role, smiling for guests while silently longing for affection that never came. In that house, love felt conditional, something I had to earn, and never freely given. In my family, there was always a clear winner and a quiet shadow. Samantha, my older sister, was the golden child, the pride of our parents. She was the Harvard graduate, the Wall Street banker, the one whose smiling face was framed in every corner of our home. When she entered a room, my parents lit up with pride. When I walked in, the light dimmed, as if I were simply taking up space. I chose event planning, something creative, something mine, but to them it was just a hobby, not a career worth respect. Every holiday dinner felt like a scoreboard, Samantha's promotions, her travels, her perfect life displayed like trophies. I became the polite shadow, clapping for her victories, while my own milestones were brushed aside, barely noticed or quickly forgotten. In that house, I wasn't truly Jessica. I was the comparison, the reminder of what I was not, the proof of what I could never measure up to. In college, I bounced through part-time jobs that paid rent but never fit. Then a friend asked me to dress a small campus wedding, and something inside me came alive. I watched the bride's eyes shine, and for once I felt what I did actually mattered. I stayed late tying ribbons, smoothing linens, fixing flowers, calming the DJ, learning timelines. Hard work stopped feeling like duty and started feeling like joy. Under thin streetlights, I knew this wasn't a hobby. Event planning was my lane, mine. I loved the order and the chaos, lists becoming moments. That night, I promised to learn budgets, layouts, and the quiet art of steadying nerves. Vendors, timelines, and tiny details made sense to me. When I told my parents I loved event planning, their faces tightened. Dad asked, "So when will you get a real job?" Mom scrolled LinkedIn at dinner, reading Samantha's promotion aloud like a toast. My news landed like a napkin on the floor. They said planning weddings was cute for now, the kind of hobby you outgrow when life gets serious and bills get bigger. Every win I shared was weighed against Samantha's, her bonus, her title, her banking clients, my work measured and found small. Dad's favorite line, "Does it pay like Samantha's job?" It didn't matter what I built. The scoreboard always started at zero. I left dinners feeling reduced, like a placeholder in my own life, smiling, nodding, and shrinking by inches no one else could see. One night I whispered to myself in the mirror, "I'm not a shadow. I'll make something they can't ignore, even if they never clap." Hurt lingered, a fire formed. I doubled down days with clients, nights in classes, weekend styling shoots. I carried folding chairs through snow, taped arches in summer heat, learned to breathe through chaos. At dawn I answered vendors. At midnight I rebuilt timelines, fixing what went wrong before anyone knew. I kept a battered notebook, budgets, floor plans, Plan B and Plan C for when Plan A exploded. Coffee became a meal, the subway my office. I edited photos between stops and pitched brides by lunch. Mistakes taught me faster than praise. A late florist, a lost boutonniere, rain that ignored forecasts. Each fix proved I could stand on my own 2 feet, no applause needed, just results that held. Exhausted but alive, I felt grit harden into purpose. If they needed proof, I would outwork doubt itself. I built a small portfolio, borrowed gear, honest notes for growth. The email arrived at 6 a.m. I'd been named a top young event planner. I read it twice, hands shaking over my coffee. Vendors texted confetti emojis. A bride sent a thank you voice note that made me tear up on the train. That night at dinner, I shared the news. Dad nodded, then asked, "But does it pay like Samantha's job?" Mom smiled thinly and said, "It's nice, Jessica. Still, it's not exactly Wall Street, is it?" I tried to explain the bookings, the referrals, the calendar filling fast, proof the work was real and growing. They traded looks. Dad said, "Awards don't cover mortgages." Mom added, "Stability matters, weddings are seasonal." My excitement shrank to a polite grin. I folded the certificate back into the envelope like a secret I shouldn't share. At home, I lined up invoices, spreadsheets, and photos, telling myself numbers could speak for me when I couldn't. Even so, their words rang in my head, small and sharp, cute, seasonal, not real, each one trimming my joy by inches. I set the award on my desk anyway. If they couldn't see its worth, I would build a body of work that made it obvious. Tomorrow I'd show up earlier, stay later, and let finished work say what words never could. We met on a rainy Saturday at a small venue in South Boston. My florist was late, and a banner needed redesigning fast. He was the freelance designer the venue called in last minute, sleeves rolled, rain on his jacket, calm like he'd seen worse. He listened while I explained the timeline, then sketched 3 clean options on craft paper. No ego, just solutions. While printers hummed, he helped me reset chairs, cracked a soft joke about chaos being a love language in this job. When the bride teared up, he stepped back so I could shine, handing me tape, pins, whatever I needed without asking. Between fixes, he asked my name, not my resume, and said the room looked like I'd stitched it together with steady hands. We grabbed coffee from the corner cart. He took his black. I took mine, too sweet. He said it matched how I coached nerves. After the vows, he offered to send files and photos, no charge, because great work deserves an easy landing. Walking out under clean night air, I realized I wasn't bracing anymore next to him. My shoulders finally dropped. It felt simple, someone meeting me where I was, not where a scoreboard said I should be. For once, being enough wasn't a fight anymore. We started with rain check coffees that became Saturday's farmers market trips and slow walks to the tea. He learned my timelines, I learned his sketches. We traded shortcuts, my checklists for his pencil lines. On busy weeks, he packed snacks and texted, "Drink water." He showed up early to carry boxes, then faded so I could truly lead on. I stopped bracing for judgment. With Ryan, wins weren't weighed, they were ours to celebrate fully together. We built rituals, Tuesday dumplings, Friday playlists, and Sunday calls with his mom, who actually listened. When a venue double booked, he fixed layouts while I rebooked vendors. By dawn, we laughed like we outran a storm. He came to my events, clapped from the back row, and told me afterward what worked, not to grade me, only to lift me up more. I learned his quiet. He thinks before he speaks, and notices what people need before they ask steady. One night, the city felt softer. Hand in hand, I realized trust wasn't a prize, it was a place to rest. Finally. We didn't feel perfect, we felt possible. For once, possible felt like enough to build on. We set a date for late summer, a small backyard wedding under string lights and a rented oak arch. Budget first, we listed what mattered: vows, food that felt like home, music you could dance to in bare feet. Guest list stayed short: family, a few friends, vendors who had become friends after 100 gigs. Ryan designed our invites on craft stock with a tiny leaf emblem. I cried over fonts, then chose the simplest. I thrifted a tea-length dress and had it altered to fit the way I like to move during a long day. Ryan picked a navy suit he could rewear, joked weddings should have pockets for duct tape and snacks. We walked the yard with a measuring tape, marking where tables would go and where the sun would land at 4 p.m. I charted timelines like I do for any client, only this time the bride was me and my handwriting shook a little. We chose tacos and lemonade with a late-night tray of mini pies, no plated fuss, just food people would actually finish. Our playlist was a collage: Motown for my aunt, indie for his friends, the song his mom loved for our first dance. I practiced my vows out loud while washing dishes. Ryan wrote his at the kitchen table, chewing the end of a pencil. We borrowed cafe chairs from a venue friend and scrubbed them clean on a sunny Saturday morning. I made a rain plan that looked almost as sweet as the outdoor setup. We mailed invites in careful script, including one to my parents. It would mean the world to see you there. I tucked the receipt into a folder labeled home, a word that felt brave and new when I wrote it in ink. At night we sat on the porch, counting fireflies between budget lines, letting the future feel close enough to touch. I checked the forecast like a habit, then told myself to trust the sky and the people who would stand with us. I tried the dress again right before bed and laughed at myself in the mirror. For once, I saw a bride instead of a planner. We set aside a seat for my dad and one for my mom, tied with simple ribbon, just in case they changed their minds. The night before stamping the last envelopes, I palmed the stack and whispered, "Please let this day be tender." The reply came on a Wednesday afternoon. Mom's text, "We can't make it. We'll be in Hawaii with Samantha." My phone buzzed again, non-refundable. "You understand." The word landed like a door closing. I called. Dad answered on speaker, "Backyard vows? Do it next year? Make it bigger?" I said the date mattered to us. He sighed. "Real weddings aren't last-minute lawn parties." Mom added, "It's not personal, Jess. It's practical." I heard clinking glasses in the background. I stood in the kitchen with the invite in my hand, the ink still smelling faintly like hope. Aunt Carol texted, "I'll talk to them," then sent a heart. I stared at the screen till it dimmed. Their group message pinged, "Family trip confirmed." Photos of resorts and lays filled the thread. I typed, "It would mean everything to have you there." Deleted. Typed again. Deleted again. Dad called back. "This is what happens when you plan small. People can't rearrange real obligations." He said Samantha's work event mattered. I said my life did too. He went quiet and changed the subject. "Mom, don't be dramatic." The words were ice water down my spine. Ryan set his hand on my shoulder. "We'll be okay." I nodded, but my ears rang. I kept hearing phrases: trivial, seasonal, not real, the same labels, dressed up as advice. Humiliation arrived in small stings: a cousin's thumbs up, a travel meme, the silence after my last text. I packed the invite back into its envelope and placed it by the door like a guest who might still arrive. That night I practiced vows and choked on the line about family. I started over and skipped it. I wrote to the caterer, added 2 seats just in case, then deleted the note and left the rows as they were. Ryan made tea I didn't drink. He asked to postpone. I said no. Anger replaced despair. I opened my laptop and confirmed every vendor again. If love had to stand alone, I would give it a steady floor. I walked the backyard and touched the 2 ribbon chairs, waiting for an answer. Aunt Carol called, "Honey, I'm proud of you." I cried for 1 minute, then set a timer to stop. Before bed, I wrote a new line in my vows: "We build what we show up for." I underlined it twice. The morning after the last call, I woke up with a clean kind of anger, the kind that organizes the room inside your chest. I opened the seating chart and removed the 2 ribbon chairs. In their place I wrote, "Space for breathing." Ryan asked if I was sure. I said yes, then added Aunt Carol to the front row and gave her the honor line in the program. We chose a friend as officiant and asked his mom to do a reading. Family by Love would carry the day. I emailed vendors, final head count, no holds, no just-in-case seats. We were done begging invisible guests. I rewrote my vows to name what mattered, showing up, choosing each other, making a life we weren't ashamed to love. Ryan rewrote his too, promising kindness in the middle of storms and coffee on the mornings he knew I'd forget to eat. I called the bank to remove my parents as emergency contacts. The clerk said, "Congratulations," and I almost laughed. At lunch I booked a tiny courthouse slot for our license. We high-fived outside like two kids who'd won a game. I called Carol and asked if she would walk me down the aisle. She cried, then asked what color to wear. In my planner I drew a thick boundary line under the word family and wrote, "Who arrives is who belongs." I cleaned the mirror and tried the dress again. I said out loud, "I'm allowed to be happy without permission." Ryan brought out the old necklace his mom kept for a daughter-in-law. He asked if I wanted it now or on the day. I said now, and he fastened it while the kettle clicked. We stood there smiling like we'd invented quiet. I took the invite envelope from the door and slid it into a keepsake box. Not trash, just not the center anymore. I emailed the photographer, "No family formals, more candids with our people. Catch the small brave things." I walked the yard at dusk and practiced walking alone, then with Carol's arm, then alone again, just to prove I could. I sent one last message to my parents, "No blame, no plea, ceremony at 4. Wish you well." Then I put the phone away. Ryan asked what I needed most. I said, "A day that is honest." He said, "Then that's what we'll make." We tested the string lights, tightened every knot, and wrote Plan B in bolder ink than any apology I'd ever written. I ordered a simple cake and asked the baker to write nothing on top. Clean frosting, room for breath. I chose flat shoes over heels, the kind you can dance in, until midnight and still mean it. Before bed, I packed a small card that read, "You did not imagine this pain, and you are not required to live inside it." I taped it inside my bouquet wraps, next to safety pins and a peppermint. A pocket-sized permission slip. Independence didn't feel loud, it felt steady, like standing true. Morning broke soft and gold over the backyard. String lights slept, dew clung to the grass, and the arch waited like a promise. I woke before my alarm and stood at the window, dress on a hanger, heartbeat steady for the first time in weeks. Ryan brewed coffee and kissed my temple. "Today we show up," he said, like a quiet drumbeat under everything. Denders arrived with the easy rhythm of friends, Dave's truck, Nina's fairy lights, the neighbor's folding table. I walked the yard with my checklist, but my hands didn't shake. I checked boxes like I was turning on stars. Carol arrived in a dusty blue dress. She hugged me and said, "Breathe, honey. This light was made for you." Ryan's mom pinned the heirloom necklace at my collarbone and whispered, "Welcome home." I swallowed back tears. We kept 2 simple chairs tied with ribbon. No names, just space. I nodded at them, and then I looked away. Guests filtered in, smiling like they'd been waiting to exhale. The playlist hummed. The lemonade caught the sun. Ryan stood at the arch, navy suit and steady smile. When he saw me, his shoulders dropped the way mine once did. Carol took my arm. We stepped onto the aisle, and the grass sounded like rain under our shoes. Our friend the officiant welcomed everyone and said, "This day is built by those who chose to be here." I spoke my vows about showing up, about choosing each other when weather changes, about love that tells the truth. Ryan spoke next, promising kindness in storms, coffee on forgetful mornings, and laughter that keeps time. A breeze lifted the ribbon on the empty chairs, waving once as if blessing what it couldn't witness up close. We exchanged rings warmed by our palms. Mine clicked softly, his caught a flash of sun and threw it back. When the kiss came, it felt like a door opening quietly in a house I'd lived in all my life. Applause rose easy and sincere. I heard Aunt Carol's laugh, Dave's whistle, and my own breath steady as a drum. We signed the license on the cafe table, ink drying fast in the noon air. Our names looked right together. I toasted with lemonade to everyone who showed up. You turned a backyard into a cathedral. Thank you for choosing us. Our first dance was on the lawn, Mowtown drifting. I stepped on his shoe, we laughed and kept time. After the first dance, the yard softened into small circles of people, voices low and kind. Ryan's mom found me by the lemonade and took my hands. You fit here, she said, like a door gently closing the wind out. She told me the story of the necklace passed mother to daughter, paused for years, waiting for the right heart. Keep it, she said. Not borrowed, yours. The clasp felt like a promise settling where my doubt had lived. Aunt Carol tugged me toward the cafe table. Stand by me, she smiled. You don't have to carry the room alone. Nina looped an extra strand of lights and whispered, You taught me timelines. Tonight you taught me courage. The neighbor slipped cash into a card for future babysitters and said, You two already look like a family. I felt something unclench, like a knot learning how to be a ribbon again. Ryan pressed my palm and mouthed, You're seen. The words landed where old labels used to sting. Our officiant handed me a Polaroid of me and Carol mid-laugh. On the white edge he wrote, Chosen, not left. I breathed in and didn't brace. The yard held me up like a net I hadn't known was there. Carol pulled a tissue from her sleeve and dabbed my chin. Mascara victory, she joked, and I actually believed her. Dave fixed a wobbly table, then bowed like a stagehand who loves the show more than applause. Someone started a circle dance. Hands reached for me without tugging, patient and sure. Ryan spun me once, not to show me off but to catch my eye and nod, Still here, still us. When I thanked everyone, the words didn't feel like payment, they felt like naming what was already true. Under the lights, I realized I hadn't checked a clock in hours. Being valued had its own time zone. Carol wrapped her arm through mine. We've got you, she said, and I knew she meant tomorrow too. I looked at the two ribbon chairs, then at our people. The ache didn't vanish, it simply had company now. I tucked the Polaroid into my dress pocket and let the night keep going without me managing it. When Ryan whispered, You good? I didn't say I'm fine. I said I'm held. And I meant every word. I thought, this is what family sounds like, not louder, just closer. After the toasts, the yard cooled. String lights held their glow while the sky drifted into navy. I slipped inside to change shoes and found my phone buzzing under a napkin on the counter. A notification banner sat there like a dare, Mom's new post. I tapped without thinking. Hawaii poured across the screen, blue water, palm shadows, a drink with a tiny umbrella and a straw. My parents in matching leis, Samantha between them. The caption reading, Family time, finally. Laughter froze in my throat. The yard sounded far away, as if someone had shut a door I didn't notice. On the next swipe there was a boomerang of clinking glasses. The same sound I heard behind Mom's call. I took a photo of my bouquet against the sink, then deleted it. It wasn't fair to the flowers. Somewhere outside they were playing our song again. Somebody had hit repeat for the kids. I told myself, we built this day. We filled the seats. We said true words. That is real, even if they aren't here. The ache answered back. But they could have been here. You saved them chairs. I wiped it with the corner of a towel and laughed once. Brittle, like a plate cooling after the oven. Still with you, I said, and meant it, even as my stomach did that small elevator drop. I let the cheers wash through me and break on the rock that was I wished they cared. Carol slipped me a tissue and didn't ask a question. She just stood there like a porch. We fed each other small bites, laughing at frosting on our noses because that's what couples do. Ryan whispered, Phone. I handed it over. He pocketed it. We get to pick the view. The dance was different than the first one, lighter at the feet, heavier at the ribs. That picture steadied me. Family could be a verb, not a place where I kept failing the test. Someone shouted speech. I said, to those who showed up, thanks for turning today into an always. After the last chorus, I slipped to the kitchen and lifted the phone. The ocean waited, impossible blue. I didn't click it. I opened the notes app and wrote, tonight was real. Pain is loud, love is patient and stubborn. I put the phone away and walked outside, where the air had cooled to apple skin crispness. We stepped back into the circle. I counted lights instead of losses, 1, 2, 3 stars I could touch. The party thinned to soft laughter and clinking forks. Night settled like a blanket tucked at the edges. I stepped inside to breathe. The kitchen light was kind, the counter still glittered with sugar. My phone vibrated again, family group chat lit up with fireworks and palm trees. A fresh photo, my parents at sunset, Samantha in the middle, the caption, our daughter's big week. Another line, proud parents in paradise. The words didn't reach for me, they reached around me. I scrolled. A boomerang of cheers. A toast to Samantha's promotion and the trip she gifted us. The room tilted. The chairs we saved flashed in my mind like 2 lighthouses no ship would claim. I checked the timestamp, posted during our vows, while my voice was naming the truth I would live by. Ryan knocked once. Need a minute? I said, I'm okay, but my mouth felt borrowed. Aunt Carol texted, here if you want me. 3 dots blinked and disappeared, as if even the phone held its breath. I blew out slowly and opened Mom's story. There it was, finally celebrating the daughter who makes us proud. Old comments stacked underneath, years of small echoes, she's the star, she's the one. A memory rose, school awards night, Samantha on stage, Dad whispering, you'll get there if you work harder. Another, my first internship, Mom's smile turning quick and thin, cute, real jobs come after grad school. And later my industry award, their reply, does it pay like Samantha's the Paz? The kitchen blurred. I held the counter and felt something inside me sit down and refused to stand again. I scrolled back to the caption, our daughter, singular. The word had no room for me. I typed, we got married today. I stared at the sentence and watched it look smaller than the ocean behind it. I deleted the text, wiped the screen. It still smelled faintly like lemons and frosting in the word almost. Outside, the band reached a bright chorus. Inside, the refrigerator hummed like a lone backup singer. I opened notes and wrote, they didn't forget I was never the point. I added, I can't fix a mirror by standing closer to it. Ryan's shadow stretched across the doorway. Still with me, he asked. I nodded and lied and told the truth all at once. He didn't press. He set a glass of water by my hand and left the door open. I zoomed on the photo. Mom's necklace catching sunset, Dad's hand on Samantha's shoulder, the future tilting their way. A thought as clean as glass. You can't be replaced if you were never chosen. The sentence landed in my chest and everything inside rearranged to make room for it. I cried then, not noisy, not pretty. Tears like a leak finding its own level. I let them fall. The kitchen towel turned into a small sky of salt. When I looked up, the empty chairs were still where we left them, ribboned questions under a quiet breeze. I pictured 2 strangers sitting there, laughing too loud, asking for seconds. The ache softened into space. Carol appeared in the doorway. She didn't ask. She pressed her forehead to mine like a prayer with no words. They posted during the vows, I said. She closed her eyes. Honey, she whispered, that's not on you. I nodded. The room steadied a few degrees. She tucked a tissue in my palm, and very softly, do you want me to say something to them? I shook my head. I want to stop asking love to be a test I can pass. We stood there until the song outside turned into applause. Carol kissed my cheek. You built a day that tells the truth. When she left, I reopened the post and scrolled the comments. A cousin wrote, best family ever. My thumb hovered. I typed, Different families can be true at the same time. I deleted it, not my classroom. I switched to the camera and filmed the kitchen, the bouquet by the sink, the plates, the door to the yard, our life, unglamorous and real. I saved it and titled it, "We Showed Up." Then the cruelest truth arrived, not sharp but simple. They celebrated replacing me, and maybe they didn't even know it. Because in our house, love had always been measured in trophies and titles, never in who shows up to hold the weight. I sat on the floor in my dress, the hem pulled like a small tied around my knees. I remembered planning other people's weddings, finding lost boutonnieres, steadying mother's hands. I remembered being needed. Tonight I was wanted by the people who chose me and unwanted by the ones who taught me to keep trying. The two truths sat side by side like salt and sugar in unmarked jars. I lifted the glass Ryan left. Water tasted honest. I stood and wiped my face and said to the room, "We're done auditioning." "You ready?" he asked. Not rescuing, just inviting. The wedding day came, and it was perfect. The sun was shining, the 100-year-old oak tree was majestic, and I was surrounded by 100 people who were genuinely happy for us. It was a day of pure love and unadulterated joy. Every laugh, every hug, every tear of happiness from our friends and family was a stark contrast to the silence from my parents. Their absence wasn't a void, it was a testament to our liberation. Standing there with Daniel, saying our vows, I felt a strength I'd never known. This wasn't about proving them wrong. This was about proving myself right. I was choosing my own happiness on my own terms. After the ceremony, as the music played and people danced, I picked up my phone. I wrote a text message to my parents. It was simple. It was final. You made your choice. I'm making mine. Don't contact me again unless it's about a medical emergency. Then I blocked their numbers. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. My old life, my old family, the constant need for their approval, it was all gone. My new family, my husband Daniel, was all that mattered now. Their absence was not a tragedy, it was the beginning. The beginning of a life built on unconditional love, not unconditional acceptance. This was my firm choice. It had been a week, 1 week of blissful silence, 1 week of waking up next to Daniel, not feeling the weight of my parents' expectations. Our little apartment, filled with our wedding gifts and new memories, felt like a sanctuary. It was my own little bubble of peace. Then, the phone rang. A number I hadn't seen in days. It was my father, Robert. My heart jumped for a second. Had something happened? Was it an apology? A part of me, that old, foolish part, still held on to a sliver of hope. I took a deep breath. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder, a silent gesture of support. I answered. His voice was as cold as ever. No, how are you? No, how was the wedding? Just straight to business, as if I were a client he was about to bill. He started with, "Jessica, you owe me the next payment on your student loans. I'm not going to keep carrying this for you. Your bank account is probably empty after that wedding of yours, but I need you to wire the money by the end of the day." The words hit me like a splash of cold water. He wasn't calling to reconnect. He was calling to assert control. This wasn't a father-daughter conversation. It was a demand from a creditor. And that's all he ever saw me as, an asset, a liability to be managed. And that was it. That was the moment. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface since the wedding, since he called my big day trivial, finally boiled over. The tiny, hurt girl inside me was gone. In her place was a woman who was no longer afraid. I took a slow, deliberate breath. I could feel Daniel's squeeze on my shoulder. I looked at him, and I saw a man who loved me unconditionally. A man who was 100 times the family my parents had ever been. I held the phone to my ear, my voice steady, my tone ice cold. "Robert," I said, "not Dad. Just Robert. I'm with my husband building a life. We are happy. And we are not going to be pulled into your games anymore." There was a pause on the other end. He probably wasn't used to hearing his name from me. He started to stammer. "What are you talking about?" "This is about money," I cut him off. My voice was low, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of resentment. "Don't call me about trivial matters," I said. Just like that. The words he had used to dismiss my wedding, my marriage, my very happiness. I threw them right back at him. The silence on the other end was deafening. He had nothing to say. I could picture him in his big office, the newspaper in his hand, a look of pure shock on his face. I had stolen his power, his control, and for the first time, he was speechless. I didn't give him a chance to recover. "I'll have the loan paid off in full by the end of the month, so you never have to call me again about trivial matters. Goodbye, Robert." And then I hung up. I put the phone down on the table. It felt as if I had dropped a 100-pound weight I'd been carrying my whole life. The tension left my body, and I looked at Daniel. He was smiling, his eyes full of pride. That phone call, meant to be a final act of control, was the final confirmation of my freedom. I didn't need their money, their approval, or their validation. I had everything I needed right there in that room with the man I loved. I hung up the phone. The call had lasted barely 2 minutes, but in that short time I had done something I'd never dared to do. I had spoken back. I had set a boundary. I had used their own words, trivial matters, against them. Daniel was looking at me, his eyes wide. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I just nodded, a small smile on my face. "I'm more than okay," I said. "I'm finally free." For years, my parents' silence had been a weapon. It was their way of showing their disapproval, of making me feel small and unworthy. It was a punishment, a constant source of anxiety. Now, the silence was different. It was my choice. It was a clear, calm space I had created. The words I had spoken had finally broken their weapon. The silence that followed was proof. Proof of a new power dynamic. I wasn't their daughter waiting for a call anymore. I was a woman who had drawn a line in the sand. I was the one who got to decide if and when they could enter my life again. And for now, the answer was no. This wasn't just about a debt. It was about defining the terms of my own existence. It was about choosing my own values over the ones they had tried to force on me. It was about building a life, not living up to their expectations. I looked around our apartment, at our little kitchen where Daniel and I cooked together, at the couch where we watched movies. This was my world, a world built on love and respect, not on money and status, a world I had fought to create. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had called my wedding a trivial event, but that event had been the catalyst, the thing that finally allowed me to define what was truly important, the thing that had given me my voice back. I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was simply empowered. The balance of power had finally shifted, and I was holding the scale. The days that followed were surprisingly quiet, not the suffocating quiet of a family dinner where you're afraid to speak, but the peaceful quiet of a home that is truly your own. The silence from my parents was a void I had been conditioned to fear, but now it was a welcome friend. Each day without a call, without a demanding text message, without a passive-aggressive email was a little victory. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't a marionette on their strings anymore. I was my own person, building my own life. I started to focus on things that truly mattered: our home, my career, my marriage. My love for Daniel was no longer overshadowed by the constant need for parental approval. It was allowed to shine, to grow, to be the foundation of my world. The money I had been saving to pay off their loan was now our money. We used it to invest in our future, to build something together. It was a tangible act of defiance, a quiet statement that my life belonged to me, not to them. The fear was gone, replaced by a new kind of strength. The kind of strength that doesn't come from a father's approval or a mother's praise, but from a quiet certainty. The certainty that you are enough just as you are. I finally understood. My parents' neglect wasn't a reflection of my worth. It was a reflection of their own inability to love unconditionally. My sister's spotlight wasn't a sign of my failure. It was a sign of their limited perspective. The silence was the cure. It was the space I needed to heal, to breathe, to finally hear my own voice without the deafening noise of their expectations. It was my liberation song played on a silent loop. Every morning I woke up and looked at my wedding ring. It wasn't just a symbol of my marriage to Daniel. It was a symbol of my commitment to myself. A promise to always choose my own happiness, my own peace, my own family. My old life was a story where I was the supporting character. My new life was a story where I was the author, and I was just getting started. The first chapter was a blank page, and I couldn't wait to fill it with my own triumphs, my own love, my own words. The silence from my parents wasn't a sign of their absence. It was a sign of my presence, the proof of my freedom. And that, more than any award or praise, was the greatest win of my life. It's funny how life works. The moment I stopped living for their approval, I finally started living for myself. The months turned into years, and my life with Daniel wasn't just a reaction to my past. It was a beautiful, intentional creation. We decided to put down roots. The first big step was buying our first house, a small, cozy bungalow with a big backyard. We walked through it, holding hands, imagining our future. Every room wasn't just a space, it was a canvas for our dreams. My father would have called it modest, but to us it was everything. It was a home we built together, a place where our love would grow, far from the polished but hollow world I grew up in. My event planning business flourished. I was no longer working to prove my worth to my parents. I was working to create something meaningful, to help people celebrate their most important moments. My passion was no longer a waste, it was my purpose. Daniel's career soared too. He was working on projects he was passionate about, and his company valued him for his talent and integrity, not for his family name. He was a perfect match for me, a person who knew true value came from within. We started a family. A daughter with my eyes and Daniel's kind smile. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The first time I held her, I felt a kind of love that was completely new, unconditional and pure. Every lullaby I sang to her, every scraped knee I kissed better, every story I read, it all felt like a quiet promise. A promise that she would be seen, that she would be heard, that her worth would never be tied to her accomplishments or a family name. I found myself doing the opposite of what I had grown up with. I celebrated every small victory. A first step, a silly drawing, a kind word to a friend. I wanted her to know that her presence, her simple existence, was enough. My new family was my greatest masterpiece. It was a home built with bricks of respect and mortar of love. It was a life I had chosen, not one I had inherited. And that made all the difference in the world. The money, the status, the awards. My parents had told me these things were everything, but I found out the hard way that they were just the dust on the surface. True wealth was waking up next to the person you love. True success was coming home to a quiet house filled with laughter. True accomplishment was seeing the love in my daughter's eyes. This was the life they had called trivial. This was the life they had missed, and they had no idea what they had lost. My new home was a place of safety, of freedom, of peace. It was where I finally felt like I belonged, not because of my last name or my family's reputation, but because I was loved for exactly who I was. My parents' absence from my life was not a tragedy. It was the greatest gift I had ever received. It was the space I needed to build a life of my own. A life that was vibrant, joyful and completely authentic. Looking at Daniel and then at our daughter, I knew I had made the right choice. I had chosen love over legacy. I had chosen happiness over status, and I had chosen myself. This was my thriving life, and it was all mine. One afternoon, I was looking at my business accounts. We were doing well, more than well. We were building a solid foundation, saving for our daughter's future, investing in our home. And then my mind drifted back to a familiar weight: the student loans. My father had used that debt as a chain, a way to pull me back whenever he wanted to. The last time we spoke, he had demanded payment, reminding me that I was still tied to him. And in my heart, I knew I couldn't be truly free until that chain was gone. I didn't tell Daniel. This was something I had to do for myself. A final, private act of liberation. I pulled up my bank account, then found my father's old account information from years ago. I calculated the remaining balance, a significant amount, but well within our means now. The money came from my own hard-earned business, from the passion my father had once called a waste of 4 years. I made the transfer, not with a note, not with a text, just a simple, anonymous bank transfer, a digital ghost in their system. The money was gone, but in its place, I felt a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't about showing them I had succeeded. I didn't want them to call and congratulate me. I didn't want their gratitude. Their approval was no longer currency to me. I was doing this for myself, for my own peace of mind. The money wasn't a gift to them. It was a final, cold transaction. It was the last link in a chain I had already broken, the last piece of a relationship I had already ended. This was my quiet way of saying, I owe you nothing. We are finally done. I imagined my father opening the bank statement, seeing the large deposit. Maybe he'd be confused. Maybe he'd know it was me. But it didn't matter. The why was for me alone to know. It was closure without an audience. It was a victory without applause. The next day, as I held my daughter, I felt a lightness in my heart. The burden I had carried since childhood, the need to prove myself worthy, was truly gone. It had been replaced by the simple, beautiful reality of my new life. It wasn't a fairy tale ending where we all hugged and made up. This was better. This was real. I had closed the book on my past, not by tearing out the pages, but by reading the final chapter and gently placing it back on the shelf. Life had moved on. My daughter was in preschool, my business was thriving, and Daniel and I were building a family on a foundation of trust and respect. The past felt like a distant memory, a story I told myself to remember how far I had come. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize, but a number I knew in my bones. It was my mother. For the first time in years, the silence was broken. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just felt a strange sense of calm. I answered the phone. Her voice was the same. A little bit whiny, a little bit demanding. "Jessica," she started, as if no time had passed at all. "You know your sister is getting a promotion, and she says they need a new assistant, but she really hates the paperwork." She was calling to complain about my sister, as if our entire history, the years of neglect, the hurtful words, the broken bond, as if none of it ever happened. She was just jumping back into the same old conversation we had always had. I didn't get angry. I didn't feel hurt. I just listened. As she talked, I looked around my living room, at the tiny handprints on the glass door, at the toys scattered on the floor, at the life I had built. The voice on the phone was a faint echo from a different world, a world where I was a background character in my sister's story, a world where my worth was tied to my parents' validation. That world was gone. She was still talking about a new car for my sister, how expensive it was, and how my dad was complaining about it. It was the same script, the same drama. But I wasn't an actress in that play anymore. I was just an audience member observing. I finally spoke. "Mom, I have to go. My daughter just woke up from her nap." Her tone immediately shifted. "Oh, well, I'm glad you're busy. Don't you forget to come visit soon. We miss you." The lie was so familiar it didn't even sting. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. "Goodbye, Mom." And I hung up. It wasn't a powerful, defiant hang-up like with my father. It was a gentle, final hang-up, like closing a book you finished reading. It was over. I looked at my phone. The screen was dark. I hadn't felt a single pang of hurt or sadness. The person she had been talking to wasn't me anymore. The person she remembered, the little girl who desperately wanted her parents' love, had faded away. My past was just a story, a lesson I had learned. But my present was the little girl who was now calling my name from the other room, asking for a hug. That was my reality. That was my love. That was my family. The call had been a test I didn't even know I was taking, and I had passed. I had listened to the voice of my past, but it no longer had the power to define me. My worth was now determined by the life I was building, not the one I was born into. I walked over to the door and opened it. My daughter's face lit up when she saw me. I scooped her up in my arms. Her hug was the only validation I would ever need. It was a love that was real, a love that was enough. That was the last time I heard from them. Their silence became the constant I had always craved. The final piece of my freedom, my love story with Daniel, my life with my daughter. This was my true beginning. A few years have passed since my mother's call. The silence from my old family is now complete. It's a peaceful silence, not a painful one. It's the silence of a closed door, and on the other side of that door, a new world has flourished. My world now is simple, and it's perfect. It's the sound of my daughter's laughter echoing through the halls. It's the sight of Daniel reading a bedtime story, his voice soft and patient. It's the feeling of a family I chose, built with intention and love. I no longer check my phone for a call that will never come. My mind isn't filled with what-if scenarios or rehearsed arguments. The mental space they used to occupy is now filled with memories of my daughter's first steps and Daniel's quiet acts of love. This is my true family, not the one defined by a shared last name or a legal document, but the one defined by shared values, by respect, by love, by the simple act of choosing to show up for each other every single day. They told me that a family was a legacy, an empire built on money and status. But I've learned that a family is a refuge, a safe space built with honest communication and unconditional kindness. I think about my parents sometimes. I don't feel anger. I don't feel sadness. I feel a quiet sense of pity. They are still trapped in their gilded cage, still seeking validation from people who don't matter. They have all the wealth, all the status, all the connections they ever wanted. But they don't have this. They don't have the simple, quiet joy of a loving family. And that's a poverty I wouldn't wish on anyone. I look at Daniel, a man who saw my worth when my own family couldn't. I look at my daughter, a child who will grow up knowing she is loved for exactly who she is. This is my legacy. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't about shouting from the rooftops. It was about quietly building a life so beautiful, so full of peace and joy that their absence became meaningless. It was about proving my happiness to myself, not to them. I no longer seek their attention. I no longer crave their validation. The need for their approval, that old familiar ghost, has finally been put to rest. And with it, a lifetime of anxiety and doubt. My life is no longer a performance. It's a journey. My triumphs are my own, my failures are my own, and my happiness is my own. This is what true freedom looks like. My love story with Daniel isn't a reaction to my parents' neglect. It's an affirmation of my worth. My home isn't an escape from my past. It's a sanctuary for my future. My peaceful family is the ultimate win. I found my peace not by fighting them, but by building my own castle. I chose to invest in what truly matters, my husband what truly matters, my daughter, my own happiness. And that, in the end, was the greatest act of defiance of all. This is my ending. The end of a life lived for others, and the beginning of a life lived for me. The beginning of my peaceful family. Life isn't a straight line. It's a series of choices, of moments that define who you are. For me, that moment was the day my parents chose to skip my wedding. It was a moment of profound hurt, but it was also a moment of immense clarity. In that one act of betrayal, they gave me the greatest gift of all, the freedom to choose my own path. The freedom to build a life on my own terms with people who truly valued me, not just my name or my potential. The pain of their absence was real. I won't pretend it wasn't. But looking back, I realized that pain was the fire that forged me. It was the pain that taught me what was truly important: love, respect, and unconditional acceptance. My story isn't about revenge. It's about liberation. It's about finding out that your worth is innate, not granted. It's about realizing that you don't need a golden child to shine. You are a star in your own right. For so long, I was a ghost in my own life, a background character. I was so busy trying to earn my place at a table that was never meant for me. I was so focused on their applause, I couldn't hear my own voice. But the silence they left behind was my sanctuary. It was in that silence that I finally heard myself. I heard my own dreams, my own desires, my own definition of happiness. And that's when I finally became real. So if you're a ghost in your own family, know this. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to beg for a love that isn't freely given. Your worth is not up for negotiation. It's not something you can earn. Your peace, your happiness, your freedom, they are not a reward for good behavior. They are your birthright. It's time to claim them. I looked at the sunset. The colors were vibrant, alive. Just like my life, my parents' absence wasn't my tragedy. It was my liberation. It was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started being me. My story is a warning to some, but a beacon of hope to others. You can be the hero of your own story. You can build your own family. You can define your own happiness. It's all within your power. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for an apology. Don't wait for them to change. Because your life is happening right now, and it's too precious to be put on hold. So, I'll ask you again. Have you set your boundaries? Have you found your liberation? If not, what's holding you back? Share your story. I sit here sometimes in the quiet of the morning, and I trace the path that led me here. The path of hurt, of betrayal, and of a quiet, burning resolve. It's a path I never chose, but it's the path that made me who I am today. I remember the day of the wedding, the beautiful dress, the loving friends, and the gaping hole where my parents should have been. It felt like a wound then. Now it feels like a scar, a reminder of a battle I won, not a wound that still bleeds. My father's cold phone call, demanding money. My mother's whiny call, complaining about my sister. I used to dread those calls. Now they're just two brief moments in a long, peaceful silence. They are echoes, not commands. The money, the house, the reputation, all the things they valued so much. I have them now on my own terms. But they don't bring me happiness. They are simply tools that give me the freedom to pursue what truly does. I think about the people who helped me along the way. My husband, Daniel, who saw my strength before I did. My friends who were my family when I didn't have one. They taught me what true love and support feel like. My parents' silence wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. The blank page on which I got to write a new one. A story of a girl who lost a family but found herself. A story of a woman who chose happiness over hate. The greatest revenge isn't making someone pay for their mistakes. The greatest revenge is living a life so full of joy and purpose that you don't even have the time to think about them anymore. It's making their absence completely irrelevant. I no longer have to chase their validation. I no longer have to perform for their applause. My audience is my husband, my daughter, my friends, and myself. And their love is more than enough. So what's my final word on family revenge? It's not a story you write for them. It's a story you write for you. It's not about winning an argument. It's about winning your life. So what's the takeaway from my story? It's not just a tale of family betrayal and revenge. It's a roadmap for anyone who feels like a ghost in their own life, a puppet on someone else's strings. It's a story about finding your voice and your power. Here are 5 lessons I learned the hard way. Lesson 1, your worth is not a negotiation. You don't have to earn love or respect. It's not something you can get through performance or obedience. It's something you are born with. This was the foundation of my healing. The moment I stopped trying to be good enough for them, I started being good enough for myself. And that's a peace that money and status can never buy. Lesson 2. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's self-preservation. I used to think putting up walls meant I was a bad daughter. But I've learned that boundaries are doors. You get to decide who gets to come in and who gets to stay out. Lesson 3. Your chosen family is your real family. My friends and my husband were my family when my blood relatives chose to be absent. They taught me that love isn't something you're born into, it's something you build, brick by brick, with people who show up for you. Lesson 4. The greatest revenge is living well. The ultimate payback isn't about making them miserable. It's about building a life so full of joy and purpose that their absence becomes irrelevant. Your happiness is your triumph. Lesson 5. You don't need closure from them. You can give yourself closure. My final act wasn't to get them to apologize. It was to pay off a debt and close a chapter for myself. True peace comes from within. So, if you're listening to this and my story resonates with you, I want you to know you are not alone. Your pain is valid, but so is your strength. It's your turn to reclaim your story. Your turn to be the hero. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for an apology. Your life is happening now. Start building your own happy ending. The world is waiting for your story.